Awesome. Okay, good timing. I feel like I'm like running straight back to back. So we already talked about this a bit on the panel, but essentially one of the things that I've decided to be working on as a founding team member is this idea of SuperNet. And fundamentally, it comes down to one of the things that was just discussed, which is we don't really have a clear standard for or really clear picture of what a useful agent looks like in the context of Web3. So right now, I think this is leading to a pretty big crisis of meaning, especially as you're seeing sort of in markets recently. So we basically don't see any agents that are meaningfully in the market where there's PMF. We rarely see value tied to how well agents solve problems as compared to Web 2. And there's a lot of different economic fragmentation and exclusion issues, unlike in Web 2, where there's clear ways to sort of view performance across agents. So right now in the markets, obviously this is being accounted for. There's a huge pull away from this general space. And when I was sort of just in SF, as I was saying before, there weren't really a lot of people that were excited about this in the context of Web 2. So there's a huge divide between AI in quote unquote the real world and AI in the Web 3 space. But I don't think this has to be a problem. And the reason I think it fundamentally exists comes down to the cyclical nature of Web 3. So there's this idea of Goodhart's law, and Goodhart's law is essentially all about metrics. So fundamentally, what it says is, okay, like we have to at some point figure out what it is that we want to measure. And in Web3, we've said the thing we want to measure is, what are the number of agents that are being created? What are the number of users using those agents? But fundamentally, these are unfortunately superficial metrics. These are not metrics that actually give us a clear picture of the value that agents are creating. And unfortunately, therefore, these are sort of mirages. But the result of this is not just a snapshot in time issue. The result of this is that over a long period of time, we sort of keep coming back to this question of why didn't we reach mass adoption? And I think the AI agent narrative is currently going through that iteration of that cycle. So without that right evolutionary environment, without those correct metrics, we eventually move away from the ultimate goal of intelligent agents that we can use in the real world, and we get stuck instead in these loops of imitation. And so this is a great blog post by a Google brain engineer on just the concept of Goodhart's law, but essentially we just move further and further away from the intelligence that we want to see in the world. And so fundamentally, there's a few major problems: agent fragmentation, too many agents that are being created and not enough that are actually producing useful results for the average person. No clear way to evaluate which agents are being useful to the average person beyond things like token price. Therefore, a natural untrustworthiness of those agents and a lack of real-world integration of those agents. So what we want to do with SuperNet is create that evolutionary environment where we can select and employ only the best agents. Fundamentally, Super Agent is an aggregate of various agents in the market, both in Web 2 and Web 3, that can be accessed via natural language to receive real-world results. And fundamentally, what that means is that we can start to create a process and pressure for the space to provide the best agents in Web 3 and compete effectively with the growing body of agents in Web 2. And so fundamentally, where we're at here is trying to decompose a tree of tasks and route those tasks to the best agents within an agent pool. This is something that we can use both Web 2 and Web 3 agents for to start. But ideally, if Web 3 is doing its job correctly and if we're facilitating the incentives correctly, we can start to see more Web 3 agents fulfilling these roles over time. And so in a task like this where we're trying to do something even very trivial like create a social media post where we want there to be a clear output, we can see how DeepSeek or how Claude or how various stable diffusion models perform relative to the best agents in Web 3. And over time, we can reward the best agents across those ecosystems. So this is fundamentally a way to solve some of those fragmentation problems by aggregating an interface and changing the incentives that we're given. So by doing this over time, one of the things that I would hope happens is that we start to see, and this is a classic arena chart that ranks models based on their performance and their arena score. This is one of the things that I think is really missing in Web3 and that we're lacking a lot of progress in Web3 is agents that are fundamentally competing at the level of these models. And if we get the right evolution and selection process in place, if we're successful, then I think we can hit those results. So right now there's 3 phases that we're looking at to help to achieve this result. The first is a unified API to connect agents across these various different environments. We believe there needs to be a better aggregation layer for the general community and Web3 at large. This is sort of what we were talked about in the previous panel, where essentially you can start to just call this for different workflows and not have to worry about which agents are actually being used, versus having to navigate like a huge sea of potential, for example, new virtual models. Second phase is user-driven iteration. Essentially, we believe that the agents that are useful will be easy to determine by the people using them. If we have this sort of RLHF for agents as people are going through this process of creating these task trees, then we can start to use those results. And as we reward people for providing those results, we can change the routes for the task trees over time and enable even better sort of agent pipelines. And then 3, like eventually this should be the simplified interface for all agents where people don't even have to think about how to A/B test the task trees or different approaches they're using, but instead can just break this down into tasks automatically by using the chat interface provided. And this is something that I think is pretty much ready to go in the next few months as a test, as an MVP. But it's something that I think will take a lot of iteration and actual work in the real world to improve on. So fundamentally, we believe that a lot of the coordination problems that we're seeing in this space are related to these sort of short-term attention cycles. And if we can work together as a space, we can actually improve the both reputation and the overall efficacy of these models and the sort of reputation of Web3 when it comes to AI in the future, and be a long-term player in the overall AI arc that's about to happen over the next decade. So let's turn coordination into cognition, hopefully over the next few years. And I hope you'll all be part of this journey. Thank you so much.